Hey, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, we're going to get started. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We have about a 40-minute presentation. If we get that point, um, we will be opening up for comments throughout. So feel free to submit any sort of questions in the chat, but we will open the floor for Q&A after the presentation just so we can get through the content. But if anything comes up and you feel the need to ask a question or you're curious about anything, feel free to put it in the chat. Like I said, we'll address it at the end. My name is James Hannis. I'm the director of the Greene County Economic Development Corporation. I also run Greene County Economic Development, Tourism, and Planning. And we have teamed up and are the lead on a $1.5 million Brownfield Coalition assessment to be taken across both counties, along with the Hunter Foundation. The three organizations are going to team up to inventory, characterize, assess, and do some pre-development planning work for potentially contaminated sites. We're going to get into what the definitions of brownfields are in a minute, but we wanted to start out by talking about some goals of this program, why we mutually believe that this is a great benefit for both counties. First is leveraging grants. OPM is also called other people's money. This sort of program is a step one to open the door to a plethora of other grants, both available inside and external of the EPA. Because of the pre-planning activities and the sort of foundational work this grant puts forward and implements, it does a lot of those square one initiatives to get us off the ground and get a lot of the informational work done about sites so that we can get our due diligence done and go after more visually impactful and tangible development money as well. Some of those step one initiatives include a site inventory and market analysis for those sites. We'll start off by identifying sites that may or may not be contaminated, both with institutional knowledge in our respective organizations and also through input provided by the community member or you. That would allow us to take a look at these sites, characterize them, score them according to community priorities, and then conduct feasibility analyses and market analyses on them to see the viability of their redevelopment work and what may be the highest and best use of that site. That would also allow us to track down additional grant funds and think longer term about a broader redevelopment strategy. But at the end of the day, this is about brownfield revitalization. This is about putting previously productive sites back into productive use. It's finding those sites
What?
that it's finding those sites that once had jobs and contributed positively to a community's economy for decades, maybe have gone into hibernation. You think of those old knitting mills or those old industrial sites sort of in a downtown corridor. It also could be a dry cleaner. It could be a number of sites that you may not think have contamination implications, but it would be step one in sort of a multifaceted redevelopment strategy for many different sites. Before I introduce county leadership for Columbia County, I know I'm a dead ringer for Sean Groden, but I'm also stepping in for him tonight. He is the county administrator of Greene County, and just a little bit of a plug for the legislature of Greene County. This is an initiative led by the legislature, not only to identify previously productive sites, but to also plan for the redevelopment in the future and give Greene County a leg up when it comes to site inventory and scoring them as well. Matt Morrell, the chairman of the Columbia County Board of Supervisors, joins us here tonight as well. Matt, would you like to say a few words?
Sure.
Recording in progress.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Matt Morrell, Chairman of the Columbia County Board of Supervisors. Our agenda tonight is to present a partnership between the EPA, Greene and Columbia counties, and the Hunter Foundation, which aims to strengthen our economy and protect our environment by transforming blighted properties into productive community assets. The supporting foundation for this work is a 1.5 million Brownfield Coalition Assessment Grant from the EPA, which demonstrates federal support for local leadership and collaborative problem solving across Greene and Columbia counties. Our goals with this initiative are simple and straightforward. Find and assess properties affected by environmental contamination so that these parcels can be soundly redeveloped, thereby creating jobs for our neighbors and investments for in our communities. I want to thank the EPA for investing in our future and acknowledge the teamwork of the Greene County Economic Development Planning and Tourism, Columbia Economic Development Corporation, and the Hunter Foundation for driving this effort. I encourage residents, property owners, developers, and stakeholders to participate, share input, nominate sites, and stay engaged as we move from assessment to action. Thank you again for joining us tonight and for your shared commitment to a healthy, vibrant, and prosperous Hudson Valley.
Very nice. Thank you, Chairman Morell, very much. Well said. Well said. Additional leaders we have tonight, we're joined by Jonathan Spampinato, President and CEO of Columbia County CEDC. Jonathan, would you like to say a few words?
Hi. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining. I really won't say much. Matt really hit all the major points here. Just thank you, the chairman and Greene County, for having the foresight to do something like this. The results could be years away, so it's not necessarily something that politicians usually embrace, but this is a really important part of bringing back a lot of blighted properties and creating a lot of new value. So thank you for joining, everyone. And I'd underscore one point that Matt said as well, and that would be participate, nominate sites. You'll hear more from James about how to do that later, but if there's one takeaway, it's figure out how you can share any information you have with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Executive Director of the Hunter Foundation and Huntertown Supervisor Sean Mahoney joins us as well. Sean, would you like to say a few words?
Just welcome everybody. Super excited to be here and to talk about this. This is a huge opportunity for everyone in Greene and Columbia County, and I encourage everyone to learn what they can. And as Jonathan said, nominate sites, because this is a critical first step to really sort of injecting good economic development back into both of our counties, and cleaning up some, terrible, possibly, locations. So thank you.
Thank you, Sean. I definitely want to underscore both of those, both Jonathan and Sean's points about participating. There's something to be said about identifying previously disturbed sites as opportunities for redevelopment. We're not trying to occupy greenfield sites for redevelopment opportunities. We're looking primarily at sites that were previously loved, had previous industry on them. And this vehicle of a funding mechanism will allow us to re-identify them and plug some much needed resources back into them. So that only comes with input from the community as well. And like Jonathan said, we'll get into that at the end of the presentation. Last and not least, our fearless private sector leaders here from HRP Associates. We have the lead on this project is Tom Sigoljic, principal with HRP Associates, and Cassie George, project manager, also with HRP. Tom has joined us tonight as well. He'll be leading the informational side of the presentation. So without further ado, Tom.
Thank you, James. So overall, my name once again is Tom Sigoljic, principal with HRP. I've been doing this for 40 years now. I'm the gray hair in this, the wise one. Cassie George will be the project manager, so she'll be taking care of the day-to-day activities. If you nominate sites, and hopefully you do, she'll be the one recording them, getting a review of them, things of that nature. And really, HRP in the EPA Brownfield world is referred to as the qualified environmental professional, meaning that we're qualified, number one, and that we are selected by the coalition to really, in a lot of ways, do the meat and potatoes of it, help create the inventory, do the phase ones to do the phase one and phase two to assess the sites, provide some costing information, help with remediation planning and getting remediation plans in place so we can put these sites in a box, as we say, so then the communities can start attracting developers. So with that, I'm going to take it down a path of, what are brownfields and why do they matter? So essentially, why they matter? There's a lot of them. Estimates are, and this is a pretty consistent estimate I see. It might be because everyone is going to the same document, EPA document that was put out a few years ago, that there's an estimate of 450,000 of these sites across the country. Within Greene and Columbia County, there's hundreds. There's hundreds. The point being that brownfields are, there really is no specific definition of a brownfield, but the best definition is any site whose revitalization is hampered by either perceived or real environmental problems or concerns. And they could be as simple as asbestos in a building. A lot of times when a municipality is trying to reinvigorate its downtown area, typically in upstate New York, those buildings were all built in the early 1900s until the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. And guess what? They most likely have asbestos. The asbestos is hampering the revitalization of that site. Other examples are classic abandoned gas stations, the gas stations themselves. A lot of strip malls had dry cleaners in them. So when someone goes to revitalize that strip mall or redevelop it as something else, whoever they're going to get money from is say, well, what are the environmental issues there? There's probably a dry cleaner, and that has to be overcome. And then you have your classic former industrial mills or larger buildings that were used for various reasons that might have asbestos in them. So there's a lot of these sites around. And really, the whole point of this is that this map here is not complete yet, but this is a map of the existing utilities across Columbia and Greene counties, and the dots represent brownfields. Now, this is just a first start. As we go through the process, there's going to be a lot more of these dots. But the point here is where you have brownfields are ones that the brownfields are where the infrastructure is and where your population centers are, because we always built where there's infrastructure. So the point here is that it's probably a lot cheaper actually to redevelop a brownfield than it is to build the utilities for a mile, maybe 2 miles out to a greenfield, because when you have to build the infrastructure out that far, when you got to run the electricity, the gas, the water, the sewer, you could be looking at $3, $4, $5, $6, $7 million, depending upon how far you got to go, what utilities you need, if they're dry or not. We can clean up a lot of sites for cheaper than that and get them ready, number one. Number two is when you have to build all that infrastructure out to the site, you have all your permitting delays because you got to go under roads, you got to do all your permitting, all of that. That takes time too. So in a lot of ways, brownfields offer a great opportunity for redevelopment. They already have infrastructure and they're already near the population centers. So really, what is the cost of inaction? We all know of buildings that we have seen decay over time. Once a building becomes vacant and abandoned, as I say, it's going the wrong way. And one of the issues is in upstate New York, a lot of towns have a lot of buildings that have been vacant since the early 2000s, 1980s, 1990s. And as you know, winters are very harsh on these buildings. What you see is, the classic. These buildings are vacant, they're abandoned. So vagrants might move in there. They can start hosting crime, things of that nature. Or at a minimum, you have broken windows. Then all of a sudden kids go in there and now you have a potential of fire. And as the winters get, as the buildings go through winter, the roofs start to collapse. Now all of a sudden, not only what you had was a blighted building, now it's dangerous, now it's open to the weather. Beyond that, it may have had asbestos in it, now it's exposed to the weather, and now it's potentially moving asbestos into the neighborhood. I'm not even, and then there's a possibility of contaminants in the soil, and as the wind blows across the soil, it could be exposing the immediate neighborhoods to metals contaminants. And really, it's just wasted potential. These buildings are just wasted opportunity in that it's guaranteed that they have all of the utilities going to them, and there's people living around it. So that space is just wasted and it's wasting away. We have to get in there and turn those sites around. And really, once again, brownfield mean opportunity. The reason being that we could go into a long discussion about this, but I won't. In a lot of ways, the government created this issue of brownfields because when they passed RECRA and CERCLA back in the 80s, it froze the real estate market. Because what the federal government essentially said is anybody who's ever touched that title can be held liable for that site, liable for the cost of remediation and get sued for it. That froze the real estate market. Ever since then, they've been working with coming up with programs to help encourage the redevelopment of these sites. So there's been a lot of activity in this area with clarifying potential liability. So for example, just last April, this is true at the federal level, and just last April at the state, they also did it, that New York State passed a law in their budget that says if a municipality goes out and acquires a site through their sovereign powers, meaning through bankruptcy, abandonment, foreclosure, the municipality can't be held liable for that site. Doesn't mean it's not contaminated. Doesn't mean they'll have to spend money to clean it up. It's just that they will not be held liable by the state or federal government to clean that site up, which is great because that opens up the market to get at these sites. There's also been a lot of funding, as evidenced by this. EPA has a lot of great funding sources to help. As this coalition got a $1.5 million grant to inventory and start assessing these sites. Once you get into the EPA family, as we say, they also have funding to help clean it up. They have grants to clean it up. New York State has great programs, brownfield tax credits, we'll talk briefly about later. And then also, New York State has its own grant program to help unlock these sites because there's a lot of them around. Obviously, if you redevelop a brownfield site, it boosts the economy, right? There's nothing worse than seeing a blighted site people have to drive by or walk by all the time. You can, it's just a drag. It's just, it houses vagrants. There's more drug activity there. If you can turn that site around, you can increase the property values in that area. The other thing is what I'm seeing, we work with a lot of different developers, in particular with housing developers. They look now at brownfield tax. They actively look for brownfields because they can get brownfield tax credits once they redevelop those sites. It makes those projects fundable now. It makes those projects live. And so now they can work with it. Once again, these brownfields are where all your infrastructure is. So we're going to, it's an opportunity because you typically have a lot of infrastructure that you need there. And just an example here that EPA did a study. For every $1 that they invest in assessments, it leads to $16 in private investment. 9 jobs are created for every $100,000 in assessment. So in reality, what happens is I'm working on a project in Troy, New York. We're working on a similar brownfield assessment grant in Troy. Troy recognized a site in a blighted area of the town. Went through the typical degradation in the brownfield. It was a foundry. It closed. It became an auto deal and repair shop. Soon enough, the auto dealer didn't work. Then it just became a repair shop. And then over time, it just became abandoned. And it just started deteriorating in a blighted neighborhood. It was like a 5-acre site with just this crappy old building that was starting to collapse in on itself. The city had us do a phase 1, phase 2 on it. Via that, we were able to attract a developer, get the site into the Brownfield tax credit program. The city spent, I think it's $130,000 in EPA funding between doing the assessments, getting the site into the Brownfield tax program, tax credit program, attracted the developer. Now it's a $40 million investment. That's how come these numbers can look so good. There's a lot of misses, but when there's a home run under this, it's fantastic. And that's what they're looking for, and it can get done. New York State in the Brownfield tax credit has generated $22.4 billion in site cleanup, 96,000 jobs since 1996. And studies indicate when you remediate the site, they increase nearby property values by 5 to 15%. So what exactly is the Brownfield program and what can we do with it? This funding that Greene, Columbia, and Hunter Foundation have can be used on any site within the geography of those 2 counties. And what we want to do is first thing is create a site inventory. Once we create a site inventory, we can start prioritizing sites. And then we can do phase 1s. Phase 1s are really a desktop review, a paper chase of looking at the site. Are there any potential contamination sources? Any potential contamination sources on the site. So if you have a gas station, obviously underground tanks are a potential source. You don't do an investigation to determine, but you document that there's are or were tanks on site. If you go to a dry cleaner, the fact that they historically were a dry cleaner and they did dry cleaning on the site, because a lot of times dry cleaners were drop-off centers. So if we can document that it was a dry cleaner, it's at the brownfield. The phase 2 is when we go out and we say it was a dry cleaner. We actually take samples on the site to determine if there is contamination on the site. And the way we determine contamination, if there is contamination, we collect soil and groundwater samples and compare them to New York State standards to oversimplify it. If they're above the standards, it's arguably contaminated in a brownfield, okay? Then we can also do cleanup and reuse planning. So once we identify, put the site on the inventory, did the phase 1, I determined that there's potential sources of contamination on site. We do the phase 2 where we collect samples and we document there's contamination. We can then do remediation planning based on the site use of the site. If it's going to be residential, continue as industrial, or become commercial, we can then get estimated costs for cleanup and a cleanup design. In the meantime, we can also use the funding to do some limited planning to get a concept of what the site will look like. And the reason for that is that's the way you really want to do remediation, is you want to understand what the site is. So for example, if you just have metals on the site, all you need to do to satisfy the environmental laws is prevent dermal contact. So the way to do that is you put the parking lot over it, and then you maintain the parking lot, and that is an accepted remediation strategy. So it's through good planning that you can minimize remediation costs. The other thing we need to do is community outreach. One of the biggest things I find to be successful, you have to educate people on brownfields. What are brownfields? How do we attack them? Everybody has a part in the program, and I'll get into that a little bit later on. But we have to educate the public. Now, obviously, there's a bunch of administrative requirements. It's really not that bad. We have to file quarterly reports, an annual report. It just lets EPA know we're making progress. And really, one of the things I've learned in working with the EPA, and I want to implore upon anyone I ever work with brownfields on, everyone at the EPA always tells me, Tom, the answer to an unasked question is no. So they're very open to any suggestions. And it's amazing some of the other activities we've been able to do with the funding. So the point is that really, anytime now there is a real estate transfer or someone goes to redevelop a site, one of the first things they'll always ask the real estate agent is there a phase 1? Because without a phase 1, that person's not going to buy the site. Then the person wants to buy the site and rehab it for housing, for example, and they want to go to the bank. They're going to ask them, have you done the phase 1 and phase 2? Because everyone wants to understand what the risk is with the site. So this funding allows us to de-risk these sites and arguably make the sites financeable, so that once a person's done the phase 1 and phase 2 and everyone understands what the costs are, the bank, the financing person can understand what it is. Now there's a project that can get financed. Without that information, the bank will say, I'm not touching this site until you get that for me. So it allows these sites to flow. And beyond that, it allows municipalities to get control of sites. You know, I can point to a lot of sites where they're just sitting there abandoned, wasting away, and they're owned by a ghost corporation because someone passed away 50 years ago. And now they can't find them. The corporation walked away from it. Whatever the situation is, there's a lot of sites like that. Now with these laws and this funding, the municipalities can go in and get control of the site, because getting control of the site is very important for redevelopment. So really, and James pointed this out too, this funding will make these sites financeable and then open up these projects to additional funding. So for example, if some community had a former industrial site along a river, which is very common, and they were afraid of acquiring it, you can nominate that site. We can then expend the funding to do the phase 1, phase two's on the site, understand the contamination. And then if you wanted to create that site into a park, now you have all the information. You have a project to do a grant application to parks and recreation. That's a much stronger application than, oh, we just want to put a park there. Here's some drawing. Here's some sketches. We can bring this site all the way through the process, as I always say, to get it on the launch pad to bring it to the next level. And the point is, this is really one of the few sources that provides. New York State, till now, really hasn't provided any funding to do environmental investigations. They just opened up the ERP. That'll open up in the wintertime. But for the last 10 years, New York State's had no funding to do phase ones or phase twos. So really, this is one of the few programs you can get this funding from. So really, as James said, our goal is to identify and address the sites that pose risk, but yet offer community benefit. A park is considered community benefit. Rehabilitation of a former building downtown as housing is a community benefit. A redevelopment of a site to create jobs, industrial jobs or commercial jobs is a benefit. That's the whole goal, is to unlock these sites, to open them up. And also not economic, but to address these environmental concerns, because some of these sites are absolutely environmental concerns. Nothing worse than a building that is exposed to weather that's full of asbestos. It's going to blow that on the adjacent neighborhood. Also, some of these sites have the potential to contaminate the groundwater. So we can start getting an understanding of that, so address the economic issues and the environmental issues. And then one of the big things, as I said earlier, is to educate the public. Let developers know that Greene and Columbia County have sites that are available. Like I said, we work with developers that are looking for contaminated sites because they want to take advantage of the Brownfield tax credits. And then educate, especially municipalities, the municipal county attorneys on the tools to acquire sites. There's a lot of great tools. So for example, if you have an abandoned site, a municipality could use a 19B to acquire that site. If a municipality, if a site is in arrears on taxes, and a municipality or a county is concerned about foreclosing on the site, and they say, I don't even know environmentally what happened on the site. New York State has a provision called temporary incidents of ownership that the local attorney, the city attorney, county attorney can go before a local judge, argue the fact that this person hasn't paid their taxes. We're concerned. We're not going to foreclose on it until we understand the environmental issues on the site. The judge will then grant, generally speaking, a temporary incidence of ownership where then that municipality can go on that site to do the phase two, to collect that information and use this Brownfield funding to get that done. And then based on that information, determine, oh, it's not that bad. Or, oh, I can understand how the strategy is going to work out. We can get additional funding to work on this site. That temporary incidence of ownership opens that up, that then they can confidently acquire the site instead of, covering their eyes when they acquire the site, is the bottom line. The point here is that, we got to get these sites moving along because there's a lot of other financial tools. There's Brownfield tax credits, which is probably one of the best. New York State probably is one of the better brownfield redevelopment programs in the country from a brownfield tax perspective. So that if a site gets into the program, you have to do an application and get into the program. You have to essentially show that there is contamination on the site above applicable levels and that it's widespread across the site. If you can demonstrate those two things, generally you can get into the Brownfield tax credit program, or actually the Brownfield cleanup program, which avails itself of tax credits. The program is great in that A, it provides the applicant legal protections, gives them that they don't have to, they get a liability release. That's the word I'm looking for. They get a liability release for that site. Number two is they get tax credits. It's from 30% if they're going to clean it up to industrial standards to 50% if they clean it up to residential. So for example, keep the numbers simple. If they spend $1 million cleaning it up and they clean it up to residential standards, they get a $500,000 tax credit. The really cool thing and good thing about that is it's only state taxes. But if they owe state taxes in the year they finish that cleanup and they owe the state of New York $100,000 in tax in tax, $100,000 tax bill, and they have a $500,000 tax credit from the Brownfield tax credit program, they will get a check from New York State for $400,000. The more important tax credit is the tangible tax credits, whereas the developer, the applicant, whoever it is, would get 10 to 22% of the value they bring to that site. And it's the tangible tax credit. It's anything that meets the IRS's 15-year depreciation table. So if you build a building, it's the foundation, it's the parking lot, but not the furniture you bring in. Where it really works out good is an industrial site, because all of the machinery would be eligible. So if someone does $1 million in cleanup and they get $500,000 there, and then they did they built a $20 million structure there, and let's just say it's 10, they get 10%, they get $2 million there. So on a $21 million project, they got just $2.1 million in just Brownfield tax credits, not to say other programs they could get into. There's other programs, Brownfield opportunity areas, which are great. If you're in there, you get a 5% kicker. Those programs are great. Then also, there's environmental restoration program that can be used to demo buildings. You also have Fast New York, Homes and Community Renewal. HCR has funding to help remove vacant building. Parks and Recreation can help with funding of parks and trails. There's a vacant building program. So there's a number of programs that we can get into once we understand the site's condition and what the community wants to do with it. So just quickly going over roles and responsibilities and how we're going to achieve all of this. It's really the coalition leaders. Sean, James, and Jonathan are really the people behind the scenes driving this whole process. It's their job in working with the community administrators, county commissioners, county administrators to develop the goals, oversee the program, select which sites are going to get to phase 1, phase 2, really pushing the process, okay? The elected officials can help identify potential sites. They would be involved in the reuse plan because that's going to be important. What do we want to do with that site? And really the biggest thing is program support, because the coalition leaders are going to be coming back to the elected officials asking for something, whether support on an application, a signature on an application, thoughts on something. They're going to be coming back to you. Community leaders also identifying potential sites, reuse planning, same thing. It's got to be this constant circle of input, because the coalition leaders are going to be going back to these various groups for input. Community municipal attorneys, really their involvement is site acquisition, implementing temporary incident of ownership, 19B, foreclosure processes. If the community identifies an abandoned site that is owned by a ghost corporation that we've determined has contamination on it and it's manageable, there's a way to acquire that site, to push that site to the next level. And then the public, really about providing information, identifying potential sites, and reuse planning. We need input as to the sites that get identified as brownfield. We have to understand what people want them reused as. And then, as we discussed, the QEPs, it's our job to assist with the inventory, complete the phase 1, phase 2, conduct the remediation planning, and guide the program from more of a technical perspective, whereas the coalition leaders are guiding the program as where it want to go. It's our job to provide advice and guide it from a technical perspective and pushing people. So really, what have we done to date? We've inventoried well over 100 brownfields. We know there's more out there. A lot of small hamlets have a site, a former knitting mill, or whatever it might be, that's huddled with residents around it. It's located along a stream or river. There's a lot of those out there. Plus, the villages all have vacant buildings downtown potentially. So we know there's a lot. We know there's more out there. That's why we're asking for assistance. And so, just to give you an idea of sites that have been inventoried so far are I'm not going to say target sites, but they've been selected. They're potential sites right now to do the phase 1, phase 2s on. So, for example, 1 Hudson Street in Hudson. It's my understanding. I guess it's the city of Hudson has identified it as one of the last sites that they can really redevelop. So it's a key site from that perspective. Hudson does not have many sites left. It's a 9-acre site with a 100,000 square foot building that, for argument's sake, is going in the wrong direction. It's been vacant for a long time. It's owned privately. Now, all these sites are going to have a different flavor to them. This particular site is owned privately by an absent corporation located out of state. They've been recalcitrant so far. So hopefully through this process, we can smoke them out to have them understand we want to create a public-private partnership to make this happen. Because this building's been vacant for over 20 years. The roof is starting to deteriorate. Once that roof goes, the whole building's going to go. And now it's going to become more of a health hazard. So it's been, it has a long industrial history. I think it was first Guilford Wood, then it became W.B. McGuire, if I recall correctly. And there's a number of concerns on the site. There's tanks that still exist. There were spills. There was a large number of abandoned drums removed in the 1990s. So there's no, to be honest with you, we haven't delved into all these sites yet, but I don't believe there's any documented environmental concerns there. But taking a precursory look at it, there's a number of concerns like the tanks, the spills, the drums. So we think there's going to be issues there. This owner, if we can smoke them out, has a chance to get a lot of this work paid for. Okay. And I know that owners are always concerned about, DEC is going to come after me. As I tell people, DEC's known about this site for 20 years and they haven't done anything. They'll appreciate it if someone rises up to do something there. Another site is the Hunter landfill. Now, it's my understanding that's a really large site, 140 acres, I believe, something on that area. It was used as a landfill. It's up on, I believe, Haylen Road up in Tannersville. And the site was used for municipal waste, and it was closed and capped from 1990 to 1993, okay? And it has a venting system on it for the methane. Now, from what I understand, also, it had historically a number of violations, but all of that's been straightened out. So now you have a landfill that is closed and capped. It's underutilized. And I understand a number of people, solar developers, have gone in there to try and create projects. Landfills are great for things like that. So maybe one of the sites we'll look at going deeper is understand all the environmental issues. And in this case, it's really about understanding when was the site capped, how was it capped. If you want to put a solar system on it, how are you going to do that? And so reverse it in that instead of solar developers coming to the town or the city of Hunter to do a solar project in there, we create the solar project and we market to them and say we have a solar, and then we're in control because now we have all the information. And instead of having a revenue suck on the community, we turn it around and start generating revenue. I'm not going to say it's easy, but it can get done. We've done it in other communities. Then there's also L&B Products out in Stockport. From what I understand, it was a manufacturer of furniture from the early 1900s to 1980s. The ownership, from what I understand, is really not clear. From what I understand also, the site was reviewed by DEC back in early 2000. And there's residents around this site. I believe it's like 10 acres. There's residents around it. But in the middle of the site, there was some sludge dumped, about 5 tons of sludge. Really not a lot, but about 5 tons. Still a concern. In the DEC's eyes, it's really not an issue because the site is capped and it hasn't impacted groundwater. But I think that with some limited more investigation there, we can really define what that is. Either A, determine to take it out because it's not that costly. I'm not saying do that yet, but that's an issue. Or we can delineate that and maybe attract some developers there and say that, well, that's where the parking lot's going to be and you can build around that. So we have to go in and understand the issues on the site. And once we do that, then we can start attracting developers to it. Another potential, so actually we're working on this site, the Peckham site in Catskill, which is a great site for economic opportunity in that this site is 1,700 acres. It's a former quarry, and they also manufactured cement and aggregate on the site. I should say it's still they are still taking some aggregate, mining some of the aggregate out of the site, but the cement manufacturing is gone. So it's a 1,700 acre site. It's on the Hudson River. It has a port. It has good electricity. It has a road. It has gas. It has rail. There's a lot of potential there. We just have to understand what the environmental issues are. Then we can start shaping a project to attract development to that site. There's not a lot of sites like this left in the state either. A lot of the big developers are looking for sites like this, so this is a great opportunity. Another site is the former Claverack Town Garage, which I understand the town owns. It was developed by Agawamp Paper, I think it was, back in the 1898, and it operated as a paper mill until 1940, and then it was destroyed by fire. And then the town of Claverack started operated as a garage, but since then it's been vacated. As I understand it, and I'll be honest with you, I'm skinny on facts, so we haven't done a phase one on it yet. But from what I understand, it's owned by the town, right? Now, being a former paper mill really isn't that big a deal way back then. But being operated as a town garage, one would assume they had underground tanks with petroleum, waste oil, and that they work on trucks and everything, so they use solvents. So there is a potential for contamination there. But typically, town garages are not, super fun sites. There's going to be some issues there. But if we can go there and study it and understand it and put all the contamination issues in a box, come up with a remediation plan, now the town has a way to market that site to a developer potentially and actually get someone paying taxes there instead of having it be this vacant site, a blighted site. Okay. Another example is the American thermostat. Now, this site I know is a hot button issue, but the point here is that, as we know, it was, they manufactured thermostats from, the 50s into the 80s. There's a chlorinated solvent plume there. The EPA has cleaned it up. The EPA has connected people to water, but now we're in the EPA family. So one of the things we can do is go to the EPA Superfund group. There's a redevelopment group within EPA whose job it is to help redevelop Superfund sites. So we make a connection there. We have some funding from the Brownfield program, so we can get some studies to determine what would be a use of the site. And EPA would back us on that. So now the point here is that, there's a lot of things moving already that we got to figure out which ones we're going to target. But now we have tools to make this work. So just some quick Brownfield examples of success in the two counties. The James Newberry Hotel in Coxsackie. I did not work on this site, but it's my understanding it was a former brass mill. It was contaminated with metals and petroleum. It's right on a small peninsula into the Hudson River in Coxsackie. The developer of the site worked with DEC to get the site cleaned up. So, and the cleanup in this case meant they removed some petroleum contaminated soil. They capped the metal areas. They stabilized the riverbank. And because they did that, and it's on, as you know, property on the water has a lot of value, relatively speaking, they were able to create a site. And then they developed a hotel on the site. I haven't been there, but I understand it's very nice, that honors its heritage. So they took a contaminated site, and now it's a tax revenue generator, a job generator, and it's attracting tourism. So my point here is it can get done. And one other quick site is the Foreland site, 100 Water Street in Catskill. The lower picture. This is a picture from the early 1900s, and as I understand it, it was abandoned in the 1980s. And the building was going in the wrong direction. There was asbestos in the building and things of that nature. Now, the reality is, if you have a building on a river, any contaminants ended up in the river back in the 1800s and up until like the 1970s or so. Most contamination went in the river. So in this case, it was really just asbestos. The village was able to attract a developer out of New York City to take this abandoned building that was going in the wrong direction, which was a brownfield, and turn it into a hub for artisan and creatives to create a buzz in that area and make things happen. So, you have to have patience, you have to have money, which this grant provides, and you have to have vision. If you have those things, we can turn these properties around. And so with that, if things go right, I'm going to be able to click on this and show you a quick, because really what, not only do we want to educate everybody, but more importantly, now all of a sudden, is it working? Okay. There we go. Well, now all of a sudden,
I'm trying to right click it.
all right, the form's not coming up for some reason.
Well, we should just encourage everyone out there to take out your iPhones right now and take a picture
There you
of
go.
this if you'd like
Thank you
to.
for that save.
Yeah. It'll take you right to the link here that James has been kind enough to host on the county's website. And regardless of whether the site's in Columbia or Greene County, you'll see that you can fill out the information in one central place,
Yeah.
and then it'll be sent off to Tom or John or James.
Yeah, it's a very simple form. And really, all we need, to be honest with you, is a site address. We do ask things like, do you know what it was used for? Things like that. There's 4 or 5 questions, and they're anonymous. And it's amazing what we can do in this day and age, just from our desktop, because most environmental records are electronic. So we can query a lot of DEC databases, EPA databases, look at aerial photographs, look at historical information to determine if there's really an issue on the site or not. So with that, really what we want is your comments. Really what we want is information on potential sites. And really what's going to happen also is throughout this process, this will be, this is not about a single site. This is not about a single project. This is about creating a process where communities can identify sites and we can roll through them, create plans, attract developers to turn the tide of these blighted sites. So we need your input, and we need your enthusiasm and your can-do attitude. So with that, if there's any questions, please let's discuss those.
I've got 2 in chat. I'll read and we can field them. How does that sound? Okay, the first is PB Inc. in a project partnership with the Village of Philmont developed a BOA, or Brownfield Opportunity Area Plan, starting in 2012 that was designated by the state in 2019. And to date, we have successfully developed 4 major brownfield buildings, including 2 former gas stations, as a readapt new business project. A question for this initiative in terms of nominating potential brownfield sites. If we know a site is a brownfield due to a phase 1, but it's currently being utilized for a business, where does your initiative stand in terms of nominating that site?
Nominate.
I would say nominate. Yeah, do it anyway.
I'm assuming what you're getting
it may
at
wind up that we have to handle it differently because it's privately owned, but put it on there. I think most owners would be happy to know that potentially, because once you've got it, and if it's already known, you're stuck with the property. So we can really help that property become much more liquid, so to speak.
Yes, and I think that, there's a lot of sites that are still actively used that are contaminated. And this process can increase it. A lot of times those types of sites are underutilized. Through this process, we can increase the value of that site because we're removing the unknown. So yeah, message here is nominate it and we'll see what we can do.
Second question is, the former Clabberg Town Garage located just inside the Village of Philmont boundary was demolished 2 years ago. Presumably the site still poses potential brownfield issues that could do some assistance for cleanup. Yeah, the dirt is still the dirt. Even if there were some issues going on with a standing building, you don't know what's under that dirt still. So there are many. I mean,
I think that's on our list too, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, but because something may have had an industrial past and the building is no longer standing doesn't mean that it's not still a contaminated site. I would still nominate those.
Yeah,
and get them on the list.
And if I can go back to the Philmont with the BOA, that's great, because any projects within the geography as defined for that BOA, and I assume it's hundreds of acres, I would assume, gets a 5% kicker under the brownfield tax credits. Plus, the other big thing is that like if you were going for an HCR grant to rehab a building for housing, you would get looked upon kindly because you've demonstrated you've already done the planning for the area. You've demonstrated that need. You've been through public meetings. So I always want to say you get the cut in line. That's really not what happens, but you get looked upon kindly. You get called out for it because you've already established yourself as a person, as a community that can get that done. So doing that, congratulations, that's fantastic. And you're in rarefied earth because I think there's like 30 or 40 bowls across the state. They're very limited.
They take a long time to get designated too.
They take a while. Yes, it's
a long-term game.
Yes, as you know personally, James.
You're right.
Any other questions at all?
Those were the two in the chat. So if there are any additional ones, speak up, or I would say forever hold your peace, but there's going to be many opportunities for you to contact us.
Yes. All right. So my closing thoughts are, this is a process. We need to be patient. It's going to take time. But when done properly, it reaps a lot of rewards. And it's going to be frustrating. But that's the name of it. That's the name of the game.
PV says, thank you for your
word.
acknowledgement. But yes, spread the word for sure.
Yeah, spread the gospel. People have to be educated to understand it can get done. You know, we got to turn around the naysayers is really what it comes down to.
Tom, and as you said earlier, public input is integral to this process. We'll have more open houses, more opportunities for additional commentary and dialogue.
Yeah, and as the program matures and we're identifying sites, you know, we're selecting sites, targeting sites for redevelopment, we might have just a consensus building meeting on a particular site, maybe like the Philmont, the Claverack, former DPW garage, maybe just getting public comment on what they want to see that as. So this public participation is going to take many shapes over time. But the first one is just to educate people, and then we'll start zeroing in on properties. Okay? So stay tuned. This is just the beginning.
Thank you, Tom.
Right. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. Good night.
Good night now. Bye now.
Good night. Thank you.